Hi, my name's China and I'm going to be reading you a short story. It's very relaxing and I hope you find it very calming. It's called The Ring of the King. Once there was a king with a ring. In the ring lay the secret of his power and greatness. The ring was made of gold brought up the river Nile, inlaid with silver brought up the river Congo, and topped with diamonds brought up the river Zambezi. So the story went. Though exactly where it had come from, no one was sure. The ring was so powerful that whoever wore it was protected from all mortal danger. That meant that no matter how many people came charging around the corner, waving spears and axes and shooting arrows, the king could never get hurt. Provided, of course, that he was wearing the ring. So the king wore the ring at all times, while passing judgment in his court, while being carried on a special sort of bed covered with ostrich feathers through the streets of his city, and even while sleeping in the royal bedchamber at night. The king wore the magic ring every hour of every day, except when he went for a ceremonial bath. On these occasions, the king was carried to the crystal clear pool beside the waterfall. There all his servants and his children and his many wives bowed low to him, and then backed away out of sight. Once they had left, the king would take off his crown of gold and ivory and peacock feathers, his cloak of gold and silk and precious stones, his sandals of ebony and his rhinoceros hide, and his robe of the purest white linen. And then he would take off his ring and hide it in a place so secret and well concealed that not his servants, nor his children, nor even his many wives could make the slightest guess as to where it was. And as soon as he had finished his royal bath, the ring was the first thing the king put on again. Before he allowed anyone to come near him, he treasured the ring because it made him feel like the most powerful king in Africa. But the day arrived when he stepped, dripping out of his ceremonial bath into the warm sun, to find that the ring was not there. At first with amazement, and then with fear, the king searched his secret hiding place and all around it. The ring was gone. Somebody amongst all his servants and his children and his many wives must have discovered the hiding place and dared to take the ring. The king was furious, but he was also afraid. If he offered great rewards for finding the ring, then everyone would know that he no longer had it. They would know that he was no longer protected from harm. They would know that he was no longer the most powerful king in Africa. For days, the king was sat and worried. He paced up and down his private chamber. He sat for hours, staring at the ground or at the sky. He couldn't sleep. All his wives shook their heads in sorrow, and his children kept well away. It was his favorite wife who persuaded him to tell her what was wrong. Immediately, she went to the house of the wisest of all the diviners, a man called Zafusa. With wild eyes and a bracelet strangling on his arms, Zafusa sprang into the courtyard where the king was sitting. Plumes of feathers danced and waved in his headdress, and strips of fairy skin dangled from his waist. He looked like a feathered leopard with 100 tails. He listened silently while the king explained about the stolen ring. Then Zafusa opened up one of the leather pouches that hung from his bedded belt and took out the set of bones that he used to find the answers to difficult questions. Smoothing a circle in the sand, Zafusa held the bones towards the sky, gave a sharp cry, and then dropped them. Carefully, he examined the pattern in which they lay. Then Zafusa straightened up and looked up at the king. "Your ring will be found, Your Majesty," he said. "The thief is close to us." "Who is it?" demanded the king. Zafusa shook his head. "You shall see. You will not need magic. Send for your woodcutters." The king did so at once, and Safusa explained to them what was needed. At dawn on the next day, all those who could possibly have had the slightest chance to steal the ring were gathered in the great square in front of the palace. The king appeared at the top of the steps, leading down from the front door, and stood there, staring silently at the bowing people. Then he clapped his hands, and soldiers appeared all around the square, ready and armed with sharpened spears so no one could escape. Through a small archway appeared Safusa, all the more terrible now with white circles around each eye and strange dark designs on his body. After him came the woodcutters with great numbers of straight wooden sticks. They heaped the sticks in the center of the square. Safusa danced around the sticks, chanting in a language nobody had heard before. It was clear to even the smallest child that he was casting a spell on the sticks. Finally, at the king's command, everyone in the square was given one stick. "Take care," thundered Safusa. "These sticks are full of power. Do not lose them. Have them with you through the day. Bring them back here at dawn tomorrow. As the sun rises, we shall see what we shall see." Sticks of power. All the people were amazed. The sticks looked so ordinary. They compared sticks with each other, thicker or thinner, but they were all the same length. In fact, they were all exactly the same length. How curious. The guards moved aside, and the servants, children, and wives were allowed to leave. Shuffling backward, of course, for no one ever turned a back on the king. So they all saw the king beckoning with a finger to his favorite wife. As she knelt before him, he whispered in her ear, "The thief is as good as caught. The stick will catch him. This night, the stick of the thief will grow in length by the breadth of 3 fingers. But don't tell anyone I said so." As he strode into the carved doorway, all the wives, children, and servants crowded around the favorite wife to find out what the king had said. Now, the favorite wife was a very careful woman. She didn't breathe a word to any of them, except to her own extra special friend. That friend was a trustworthy woman too, and she told only her mother and her wise old aunt. But the strange thing was, by the time the sun was set that evening, every single person who had been in the square knew that by dawn the thief's stick would have grown in length by the breadth of 3 fingers. Night came as swiftly and as silently as it always did. When the first tinges of dawn showed that the night was over, the crowd gathered in the square, and they all had their sticks. The sun crept up into the sky, and suddenly there was Safusa, a gleaming spear in his hand, glaring at the people. The king appeared, being carried on a special travelling bed with the ostrich feathers. Beside him walked the chief builder in the kingdom, bearing his measured rod. Stick after stick was measured, all the way around the square. Not one of them had grown so much as a fingernail in length. But there was one stick, carried by the sweating servant with a shifty look in his eyes, that was exactly the thickness of 3 fingers, shorter than everybody else's. "There's the thief," shrieked Safusa, leaping high into the air and waving his spear. "Take him," yelled the king, ordering the royal guards into action. "Feed him to the lions." The thief promptly forgot that the ring protected him and fell to his knees and cried and pleaded. He took off the ring from the hand he had been hiding and gave it to the king and cried some more and begged for mercy. And the king was so pleased to have his ring back and to be the most powerful king in Africa once more that he allowed the royal lions to go without their breakfast. The thief was set free. Free, that is, apart from small punishment. He had to run around the city 3 times, and the children chased him all the way around, all 3 times, and they found quite a different use for those sticks. "How did you manage that?" asked the king, as he was recovering in his private chamber, and Safusa stood watching bag after bag of gold being brought from the king's treasury. "Your magic must be even stronger than the magic of the ring." "Not so," said Safusa. "I told you it would not need magic. All it needed was one very guilty man. He knew so well that he was the thief that he really believed his stick had grown 3 fingers in length during the night. So he cut off that length and thought nobody would notice." Safusa tied up the bags of gold and a spare sheepskin he had had the foresight to bring with him, and bowed to the king. "There is more than one kind of magic, Your Majesty." The end.